Hey y'all, thank you for stopping by. I am currently multitasking and I'm filming this little intro at the school pickup line waiting on my daughter. So if you see me looking around, it's just because I'm awkward and I feel like everyone's staring at me even though no one cares. But anywho, so I'm jumping the gun a little bit and I'm already thinking about summertime meals. It's just around the corner and I am so excited. So like, other than grilling out, one of my #1 favorite things to use in the kitchen, especially when it's hot out, is my crock pot, and that is for 2 reasons. The first one, being a big one for me, is I love the fact that my crock pot does not heat up my kitchen like my oven does. I cannot stand that, especially when it's blazing outside. It makes me just want to throw my hands in the air and say forget it, I'm not cooking, let's go grab some fast food, which there's not a thing wrong with that, but you know, like when you're trying to budget a little bit better and save some money, you catch my drift. But secondly, when it's beautiful outside, I want to spend every minute that I can outdoors versus hovering over a stove for a couple of hours every night, and I'm sure that most of you guys can relate. Plus, it is softball and baseball season, and if you or your kids, grandkids, whoever is involved in that, you know how time consuming it can be. So I just wanted to be sure to get up 3 new dump and go recipes, new to me I should say, that I think would be perfect for summer, and they're all really effortless but all super yummy, and at the end of the day, that is what matters. And also be sure to stick around to the end of the video because I'm also going to be including a delicious dessert. It was my first time making it and I think that you guys would really enjoy it as well. So I believe I said everything that I wanted to, so let's go ahead and jump on into the recipes. Okay, so I'm a little stuffy this morning, so please just overlook that throughout these voiceovers. But first up, I made some barbecue beef sandwiches. I didn't follow a recipe, I just made this up on the spot, and I was super pleased with how it came out, so let me show you how I done it. So I started off with a chuck roast. I have always used like pork or chicken for barbecue sandwiches, so I was excited to see how this would turn out. This is 2.5 pounds, and yes, it is a little on the pricey side, but this will feed a lot of people, and the best part about it is the leftovers always freeze perfectly. I've never had trouble. So the seasoning that I'm going to be using is this Grippo's barbecue seasoning. Grippo's is a popular brand here in Kentucky. I know that you can't get it everywhere, even though I'm sure you could probably order it online. But just use your favorite barbecue seasoning if you can't find it, or just your favorite seasoning blend. And as you can see, I drizzled a little bit of olive oil on the roast and I just massaged that into both sides. I just wanted to really make sure that the seasonings would stick. And as you can see, I did pour a generous amount of that seasoning, and I'm going to repeat that to the other side and massage it in. Now, I will say I have noticed that anytime I've used this seasoning, the meat seems to lack a little bit of salt. So that's the only thing I would do differently, is I would just add a little bit of salt to the meat. But of course, you can do that in the end as well, but you know. So now I'm just going to add some Dr. Pepper to the bottom of my crock pot. I poured in about half of that bottle. This is how I make my pulled pork, so I figured I would do it with the beef as well. I'm also going to be adding in a few dashes of Worcestershire sauce. I have never done this with like a barbecue sandwich, but I was going for some liquid smoke and I forgot that I had thrown that out a few months ago because it was super expired, but I think liquid smoke would go really good with this. But once I got my meat added and I added my lid, I am going to turn the crock pot on low. Ideally, I would say to cook this anywhere from 7 to 8 hours, just depending on your crock pot. But the way my day went, I didn't get back in time to turn it off, so this cooked closer to 9 hours, which to me, that's kind of overcooking it just a little bit, but they still turned out really good. I like to remove the meat to a separate bowl. That way it's just easier to dump out the majority of that liquid that was in the bottom of the crock pot. And I'm just breaking up the meat. Really, you just need 1 fork because as you can see, it's just falling apart. This is also a good time to be on the lookout for like big chunks of fat. I like to discard those because I don't want anyone biting into that when they're eating their sandwich, but you know, everyone's different. But I'm just going to plop that back into the crock pot, and now I can add in some barbecue sauce. So I'm going to add in this full bottle of the Grippo's barbecue sauce, and as I said before, if you can't find this, just use your favorite one. Although this one is really good, Sweet Baby Ray's will probably always be my favorite. But I'm just going to stir that into the meat. Ideally, you would want to turn your crock pot onto high and let this go for an additional 30 minutes. That way the sauce can like really cling to the meat and kind of caramelize, and it will be a lot less messy. But as always, I didn't have the time to do that step because I had to get Riley to her softball practice. So we actually ended up eating these in the car. That's why I'm rocking the paper plate. This is definitely not something you'd want to eat in the car because it is messy, but oh well, I guess. But I did butter and toast the buns, added a good amount of that meat, and you just gotta have coleslaw with your barbecue sandwiches. It just takes it to a whole nother level. It is the best combination, and this is just one of my favorite things that I do not have as often as I think I should. But I just threw a bag of baked chips on the side, and that was dinner. Next up is some cilantro lime chicken tacos, and just a heads up, this was hands down my favorite thing that I made in this whole video. They were so incredibly good. So to make these, I started off with 2 boneless skinless chicken breasts in the bottom of my crock pot, and I am just sprinkling over 1 packet of taco seasoning, followed by a whole jar of salsa. And yes, I like to run mine through a blender because I cannot deal with the chunks, but you can definitely skip that step. Next, I'm going to add in this whole bunch of cilantro, and I wanted to show how I've been doing it recently because it has been life-changing. I just twist off the bottoms, and then I chop the whole top part, including the stems, and it saves so much time. I used to pick these little leaves off one by one and then chop them, which resulted in me wasting a lot, so I just love this little hack, and I'm just going to place all of that on top of the salsa, and then I'm going to add the juice from 2 limes. And this step alone made me excited for this recipe and made me immediately know that it was going to be incredible because I have just been so obsessed with limes, and it's funny to me how much our taste buds change, because even a year ago I never bought limes, I never used them for anything, and now it's like a staple ingredient in my house. And the same thing goes for cilantro. The first time I used it in a dish, I honestly didn't care for it, and I thought, how in the world do people love this so much? But now I'm obsessed with what it does to a dish, the flavor that it adds. But anyways, I've added my lid, and I'm going to cook this on low for 3 hours. And here is what it looked like once the chicken was fully cooked. I loved how thick the sauce stayed. I was worried about the chicken kind of watering it down, and it didn't that much, so that was pretty cool. Now I'm just adding it to a separate bowl, and you could pull out a hand mixer at this point and it would shred it up within a few seconds. I don't know why I don't do that much. I just did it the old-fashioned way that I always do it, just 2 forks, pull it apart. And now I am just taking a spoon and I'm just kind of ladling in that sauce from the crock pot to get it to look the way that I wanted it to. I was doing this just to kind of help prevent it from making the tortillas too soggy, but honestly, the way that sauce was thick, I probably could have just dumped that into the crock pot and tossed everything together and it would have been fine. But you could also take that additional sauce and just top it on your each individual taco. But yeah, so I'm going to be stuffing that into these tortilla bowls. I know these have been around a long time, but this was my first time purchasing them. And oh my gosh, they made me so happy. It was so much easier to put the toppings on and to pick it up. Highly recommend if you haven't tried it. But I just topped mine with some cheese, avocado, sour cream, and some more limes. And I cannot wait to make this again. Next up is a ravioli and sausage dish. Super kid friendly. I feel like most kids like pasta, tomato sauce, and cheese. And my kids, they prefer no meat when it comes to stuff like this. So I love that the sausage was in big chunks, which made it super easy to just not serve that to them and just give them the ravioli while Josh and I got to enjoy that. So to make it, I started off with a bag of frozen cheese ravioli and just dumped the whole thing in. And then I'm going to add some Italian style petite diced tomatoes, juice and all. I did use 2 full cans. You could also run this through the blender if you think your kids would prefer that texture, but my kids didn't mind. I'm also going to add this full can of tomato sauce. I believe it was 15 ounces. I was going to give this a quick toss. I wanted to be sure that some of that sauce fell into the bottom. That way the raviolis wouldn't stick. You could also spray this with nonstick cooking spray if you wanted to. I'm also going to be adding some Italian sausage on top. I did choose the hot because I wanted a little bit of spice. Plus, I knew my kids wasn't going to touch it anyways. But Josh did say it was too spicy for him. He is super sensitive to spice, so I would just get the mild next time. And to be honest, I do not buy Italian sausage. I made it once before, maybe like a year ago, something like that, and we just didn't care for it. It had a strong fennel taste. I bought the Great Value brand one, and a lot of you guys commented it and said to just try a different brand, so that's why I went with the Johnsonville this time, and I will say it was much better. It still isn't like my favorite cut of meat or anything. I've never been a big sausage person unless it was like Polish sausage, but that's just a personal thing. But I was super happy that I made this recipe. It may have just changed my mind on Italian sausage, but I did end up having to cook this on high for about 4 hours. It took a while to get that sausage done. I was worried about it adding a lot of grease to the tomato sauce, but it honestly didn't, so that was nice. Also, be really careful when you're serving this up because you don't want to break up your ravioli too much. But here is my bowl. I am just topping it with some shredded Parmesan cheese. Josh kind of had to help me there because it was hard to do with one hand, but y'all, this one impressed me. I honestly wasn't looking forward to it all that much, but we all really ended up enjoying it. The only thing is, I would say this is best served fresh. The leftovers aren't as good. Okay, so hopefully you are still here with me, but it is finally time for dessert. So I made a blueberry peach cobbler. I don't make desserts all that often, and it's rare that I do it in a crock pot, but that definitely needs to change because this was amazing and definitely a treat. So I started off by adding a full container of blueberries to my mixing bowl, and yes, I did make sure to wash them first. You could also do frozen blueberries if you wanted to. And I used some frozen peaches. The recipe called for 5 fresh peaches, but I could not find those in the stores just yet, so that's why I went with the frozen, and I didn't really know how much to add, so I just did like 1.5 bags, so it seemed to work out. Peaches and blueberries taste amazing during the summer, so I'm already looking forward to recreating this. But yeah, so now I'm adding 3 tablespoons of sugar to the top of the fruit. I'm also going to be adding in 2 tablespoons of some cornstarch. Then I'm going to whip out some pure vanilla extract, and I'm going to add in about 1 teaspoon. Didn't measure it, just eyeballed it. Doesn't matter. Vanilla tastes good in so many desserts. But yeah, now I'm just tossing everything together, trying to get everything coated, but definitely doesn't have to be perfect. And now I'm going to get started on the cobbler mixture. So to another mixing bowl, I'm adding in 1.25 cups of all-purpose flour, a 1/3 cup of sugar, 1.5 teaspoons of some baking powder, a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, ground cinnamon I should say, and then a 1/4 teaspoon of some salt. And I'm just going to give that a quick whisk. And then I'm going to add in 5 tablespoons of some cubed, cold, unsalted butter. And I'm just going to cut that into the flour with the back of my fork. But if you have a pastry blender, now would be the time to whip that out. That would make it a little bit faster. Then for the last ingredient, I'm going to add in a 1/3 cup of buttermilk. And I'm just going to stir all of this together. This is going to get super crumbly, and that is exactly what you want. So I am going to assemble everything now. I've sprayed the bottom of my crock pot with some nonstick cooking spray. And then I am just going to dump that flour mixture out and just smooth it out into an even layer. And then you guessed it, I'm just going to add all of that fruit onto the top. Again, kind of spread it out to your liking. And then I'm going to pop my lid on, and I cook this on low for about 5 hours. But remember, if you are using fresh fruit, you'll probably want to cook that for a little bit less because, of course, if you add in frozen fruit, it's going to take a little bit longer. But all I was looking for was for the edges of this to get slightly bubbly, and as you can see, it looks just right. And I think this just looks so gorgeous, the combination of that fruit. It's so pretty. But I did turn off the crock pot, and I set a timer for 30 minutes. I wanted it to sit before I went to serve it, so everything kind of had time to like set up. But yeah, so that's what it ended up looking like. How yummy does that look? And it really was. The bottom layer was almost kind of like a cookie, in my opinion. But I wanted to zoom in on this because I was super impressed that nothing stuck to the bottom, nothing burned. It all just came out so clean, which was super satisfying. But we just topped our bows with some whipped cream, but this would also be super good with like a scoop of vanilla ice cream. And this dessert was not like overly sweet at all, which we really enjoyed. But that is going to wrap up this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye, guys.